Do you feel your work might be replaced by AI?
People are trying to use or leverage GenAI to replace the way that people work. We actually built some solutions in terms of helping people writing code, still writing code. Whether or not it's maybe 80% written by AI, one of the biggest challenge that's about the domain knowledge. The AI could do the trick, but sometimes it misunderstands the spec a lot. The next breakthrough is really how you can redefine the process.
This is where we bridge the gap between innovation and scientific discovery. This is where technology meets science, a podcast by Epsilon. Each episode brings you insights from industry leaders who are pushing the boundaries of what's possible in life sciences. Enjoy, and if you like the series, click that subscribe button. This series is brought to you by Epsilon, a technology company that empowers pharmaceutical and life science companies to leverage open source technology for faster, data-driven decision-making in regulated environments.
Welcome back to Where Technology Meets Science. In today's episode, we're going to talk about generative AI, the topic that has dominated so many different industries, and pharmaceutical is no exception. I want to welcome my guest today, Vincent Shen. Welcome. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Nice to meet you here.
Can you briefly introduce yourself and tell me more about your role at Roche?
Yeah, so I have been with Roche for 10 years. Throughout the 10 years, I've been working as a data scientist, dealing with clinical trial data, some marketing access data, real-world data. But most recently, for the past few years, I've been working on more as a product manager in terms of software solutions. We are building our packages for clinical trial analyses, and these are mostly open source. And I'm also leading a number of GenAI initiatives right now to bring efficiency to our workflow for clinical trial analyses. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I want to start with, because we are going to talk about the generative AI and where it actually brings the real impact and where maybe other technologies, other methodologies might work better. So do you feel your work might be replaced by AI in the future?
Well, I mean, the short answer is no, I don't think so. But it also depends on how you define work. If you see work as something, like that you routinely do on a daily basis, those kind of like those tasks like replying emails or like writing meeting notes and those kind of things. And certainly, I think AI will play a large role in those. I think in some cases, these are sort of replaced by AI already. But I see this as more kind of like the work itself is also evolving. So the work that I'm doing, and I believe many people are doing, involves a lot of, let's say, critical thinking or creative thinking to sort of like designing, building the solutions. I think those parts, I don't want to say it's not going to be replaced by AI, but it's going to be quite difficult to be replaced by AI as of the capability as of its capability today. So I believe, the work, you have to redefine the work as you go, and the work itself is going to evolve as well. So, personally, I don't believe that my work will be replaced by AI, but certainly my work will evolve and hope we can still bring a lot of value to the design of the solutions and build of the solutions in the process. Yeah.
So for now, we can say that AI will probably help you in your work and redefine your work and maybe speed up what you're doing rather than replacing your role completely. I want to jump into the real world cases. Can you tell me a little bit more about how your team is using AI within clinical reporting?
Yeah, so at Roche, we are at a stage that we are adopting a lot of the open source solutions. We build a lot of those for our clinical trial analyses. We have our packages, also some Python solutions that we build to facilitate or bring more efficiency to our clinical reporting process, let's say. With that, people have to learn a lot of about these new tools, programming languages, systems, and everything. So to facilitate that, or to sort of like lower the learning curve, let's say, we actually build a number of solutions to to resolve that issue. First, I think we have launched a solution that leverage RAG to be sort of like a knowledge bot to cover a lot of the user guide information for the new systems and new tools. And this has been launched for, I think, close to a year now. It has a lot of the users on a daily basis, and people really like to use that to quickly get the knowledge, quickly get the user guide or the answer to some of their problems when they use the new system and tools. So that's one very successful use case. The other is we're also building some solutions to help people to write the code to do their clinical trial analyses. So you may know, like the trial analysis is kind of like a niche area in terms of, if you look at the data scientist sort of work as well. And for that, we actually built some solutions in terms of helping people writing code, helping people, identify some analysis and how could they run this analysis quickly. We also build some solutions like that internally. Well, we also have some prototypes that to help scientists who may not have a strong, let's say, analytic background to write code by themselves. But if they have a data, they would like to learn more about this data set or at least get some exploratory analysis out of this data set. We also have tools to internally that we build to solve this kind of problems as well.
And do you track any KPIs in terms of the adoption of those tools within the company, or maybe not necessarily numbers, not necessarily quantitative results, but maybe some feedback from the users? You mentioned that the chatbot was already used by how many people?
Yeah, so for the knowledge bot, we call like clinical analysis assistant. Internally, it's been, I think, for around about a year now. It has over 1,000 users. Global. And we have, we track those, how many questions are asked. I think so far we have close to 70,000 questions asked on the system. And people could rate the answer, like you can sum up, sum down, like these are kind of like the feedback UI. And we got like so positive feedback from our user base that people really like to get, the answers from this chatbot, because, the back end of this chatbot actually refresh knowledge in a semi-automatic way, so that you can always retrieve almost the latest information from the system, from the tools, and you can always get the 24/7 sort of like support from this bot. So like to us, it's saving a lot of time in terms of user support, knowledge transfer and those kind of things. And we, it's not official, but we're estimating, if you think about you ask a question to the real, human, you either have to wait for the colleague to look for the information for you. Sometimes, because we work in this global, time zones, sometimes our colleague is not available at that moment. So this chatbot, really, we estimate that it could save you about like 25 hours per 100 questions. That's kind of like our estimate. That is about like 15 minutes at least on one question. So that's kind of like to me, that's quite conservative estimate, but it actually has a great impact in terms of our user support, and it actually saves us a lot of time and money in terms of providing that resource or support resource to our colleagues.
And do you see that there's any acceleration in terms of like clinical development in general, thanks to like different tools, also like code generation with the coding assistant and the chatbot, because you save a lot of time?
Yeah, I think these are working for different sort of like from different aspects. For the knowledge bot, or those kind of RAG-based solutions, it's kind of like providing the user support, and we track sort of the metrics from there. For coding as assistant, let's say, it's a little bit tricky because you have to look at the outcome of it. Like maybe the code is the suggested code could be run or not in those kind of things. So we're not really tracking those metrics as of today, but we're thinking about how to better collect those metrics to see the impact for scientists or data scientists. But I can tell you one example. For writing code specifically for our non-data scientists or like clinical scientists, let's say, is actually bridge a big gap that they want to get a quick understanding of the data. Usually these tools are going to provide them this first-hand information. If for those who don't even know how to explore the data at all, usually they rely on the data scientist team to give them some resource and like to get some information of this data set usually takes some time. But right now, for some basic analysis, how many patients are there, what is our population, what information are available in this, like those basic things, it's going to be quite easy for them to quickly get a number, or it save them a lot of time already. So yeah.
And what are the limitations and challenges in implementing those tools?
Oh, yeah, I think I can continue speaking about this, let's say data scientist helper or like clinical scientist helper, like this kind of things. One big challenge is that we want to ensure that the bot actually understand how the analysis should be run. So that you don't want a bot to just make things up, that run some analysis that doesn't really follow the statistics, rules, or like make some assumptions that's not really applicable in this specific type of data. To do that, you have to train the bot a lot to give them a lot of the domain knowledge that you have in your sort of like analysis domain or like your area, and that is usually quite challenging. And this is also like where our users sometimes have some concern, like they can't verify if the analysis proposed by the bot or the agent is actually correct.
Yes.
While it may be numerically correct, but maybe from a statistical perspective or from a clinical perspective, it doesn't really make much sense. For their analysis or for their project. So that's certainly one of the biggest challenge. That's about the domain knowledge, and also I think is just maybe it's. For industry, for the pharma industry, I think traceability is very important, and you want to know how this analysis is generated, what kind of code is proposed, and how this code is run on what type of data. And I think generating the code along with the readouts is going to be very, very important. I think this traceability is key in this industry specifically. And another thing is really about the patient level data sensitivity. As you probably know, like you can't just train the model with all the trial data, and that's kind of like violating certainly the patient sensitivity, like those kind of rules. So this is also a lot of the challenge in terms of training the model, in terms of the analysis. So what we are doing right now, like we're focusing on the code, like in our domain is sort of like the SDTM code, the ADAM code, the TLG code, like that we do create our analysis process. We use those code to actually train the model rather than the data to train the model. So that's kind of like our approach to sort of like protect the patient sensitivity, and that's very, very important in this industry. I'm sure it's also important in other industry as well, but like this is in this specifically in this pharma industry, I think that's very, very important to be aware of. I think in terms of other challenges, I would say maybe from a user perspective, that's what we learned when we launched this knowledge bot that has a lot of users. At the very beginning, you have to do a bit training in terms of how you write this, your prompt, how you actually ask the question, and the way that you ask the question will almost like dictate how like the answer will perform. So that's actually a lot of the new things that we learn along the way, that you have to almost like give people some training in terms of how you can write a prompt to get a better answer. So that's something new. I think we have never done something like this before. Like usually the traditional way of working is like we write this document, we just send it to you, and you just read it all through, and then you kind of like learn it from the documentation or some examples or training videos. But now you're actually interacting, like talk to something that will get you a response almost like immediately, and you have to change the way that you talk to the bot to get a better answer. So it's kind of like a different way of getting information, but I think this is something new that we learn, and it also brings us some challenges and learnings, and that we're trying to refine that process to make it better.
And when we maybe could just go a little bit outside of Roche, or maybe you have more examples, but do you know where do you see generative AI or AI in general finding applications within clinical data analysis, clinical reporting?
Yeah. So I'm aware of a number of efforts, from, let's say, from an industry perspective in this clinical analysis domain, that people are trying to collaborate to see if we could leverage AI to do the submission. There is a sort of reviewer guide that we have to generate. So let's say if we submit to AI, together with all the outputs, all the results that we submit, we also give them, like, the reviewer a guidance in terms of, like, okay, this file is for that, open this if you have this question. This is very, plain English reviewer guide, so that to facilitate people to review the outputs or the submission materials. For that, I think it follows a very standard, let's say, format or layout, and like this applies to all the companies who want to do a submission. So I think several companies, and also I think from our consortium or like the Fuse initiatives, like people are collaborating to get this done together with leveraging some AI efforts. I think there's a common interest in this space to build a solution like that. So I'm aware of that. I think, hopefully this will, we can do the pilot and then work with health authorities to get this, get this moving. The other thing I think is all about this coding assistant, because, like, it's moving towards this R journey or more open source solutions. I think people would like to see how we could leverage AI to get better, let's say, support in terms of helping people migrate to this open source language or tools. For that, I think different companies, if they're on this open source journey, they're all building, including us, like they're all building different kind of chatbots to facilitate that process. So I mentioned to you earlier, we have built our own, let's say, chatbot to help people write code. I believe other companies who are on this R journey or, like open source journey, they're building something similar. To me, I think the collaboration is certainly a possibility, but I see it quite different in terms of if you compare that with collaboration on, let's say, Admiral package development or TL package development, because contributing to a, let's say, open source package is a level of commitment that, developers are going to contribute on the code base. But this one, contributing to the specific chatbot would require you to, supply a lot of your internal materials to get a better performance. I think a lot of companies, they have hesitance in terms of doing that. So, I can give you, from my perspective, when we try to boost the performance of the bot in terms of coding assistant, we have to give it a lot of the internal code base to help the bot to learn a lot of our domain knowledge. We usually do this analysis in this way. So if you see the prompt in something like that, use this piece of material to answer that question or something like that. So we build a lot of these kind of things into our bot. But if you switch to another different company, they may do things differently, or they have their own standards or things to follow. A lot of time, it's up to the company to say, okay, we do want to share this information or not. And that's usually, if everyone is okay to share a lot of their internal standards out, I think we are at a stage that we can do better collaboration on building the chatbots. Otherwise, it's going to be quite challenging. I'm not, right now, I'm less worried about, like the computing resources, because I think it's getting cheaper and cheaper. So there are a lot of open source models, large language models that we could leverage. So I'm less concerned about that perspective. But I think the training material that you're going to feed into the chatbot is going to be quite challenging if you're thinking about the industry-wide collaboration, because I'm not too sure if everyone is happy with sharing their internal standards or like way of working publicly.
So if I understand it correctly, like even if the companies were willing to contribute and share the standards and share like their internal information, there's still going to be a challenge because everyone has different standards. So to bring them all together, it's also going to be okay. Maybe just move to the future. How do you see the next developments within Roche in terms of the new initiatives within Gen AI?
Like at Roche, we are, like these, let's say this knowledge bot, the coding assistant bot, like for also the bot for like say clinical analysis for non-data scientists. We see those as individual prototypes or projects that tries to tackle let's say a defined scope of questions. Like the knowledge
Mm-hmm.
bot has been several use cases already. Like I'm telling you, that's the most popular one is probably that clinical analysis assistant that has the most users. But there are also other knowledge bots that built specifically for certain processes or certain other user groups. So there are a lot of like prototypes that's happening at the same time. But what we're thinking in the future is like how we can actually connect all the pieces together. So if you think about a data scientist in the pharma industry who does, let's say, clinical trial analysis, it's rarely that this person would only need a knowledge bot to understand the process. It's usually the person would need some help in terms of retrieving the information. That person would also need some help, maybe writing the code, writing the report, like even propose some new type of analysis. So this is a whole process, and right now we have solutions for those for certain like checkpoints on this whole process. What we're hoping to do in the future, where we're piloting some of those things right now, is that we want to build
Mm-hmm.
like a agentic approach that could look into this end-to-end process together, so that it's kind of like a fit for purpose process that like you can almost, I mean, a data scientist could almost start with a question like, okay, I'm going to do analysis on this trial. Could you maybe suggest me where to locate the data and how to ingest this data in, how to
Mm-hmm.
pre-process this data, how to run certain type of analysis. You can use almost like a natural language to trigger the process of your reporting event. We're looking at this stage like this as a sort of like a North Star sort of like goal, and we want to tackle this problem using the GenAI technologies. And this is very important in our like GenAI like projects and initiatives, because I think it's very important to set this up as a modularized approach. That right now we
Mm-hmm.
do have this code assistant and we can improve it over time, but you would like to plug this into any process that involves coding, right? So we were kind of like building like those blocks, and we try to connect them in the future to give people a let's say the Gen AI assisted like workflow in the future. So that's something we're looking at very actively right now, and we're going to try some of the prototypes and to see how this could be done properly. And I think one very interesting area, connected with this is that we kind of want to rethink about the process. I think I talk to people on this a lot, that usually when you think about this Gen AI technology, people are trying to use or leverage Gen AI to replace the way that people work on the same process. So instead
Mm-hmm.
of me writing code all by myself, I now have Copilot, have Cursor, I have those kind of AI tools to help me write code faster. But I'm still writing code, whether or not it's maybe 80% written by AI, but the process is still the same. But nobody, or like very few people, actually rethink about how the process should be redefined. Like it's like we have a lot of tasks, and we're trying to leverage AI to get things done faster, which is
Mm-hmm.
great. But I think the next breakthrough is really how you can redefine the process. I think I'm not sure how many people are really leveraging AI to rethink the process, but I would feel like the new challenge or like the new breakthrough is going to happen in that field, because I think a lot of things could be improved in terms of the process redefining. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's going to take on this, and a lot of the initiatives are happening at Roche right now, and we certainly would like to work more on this field in the future.
Okay. I've got two follow-up questions regarding the redefinition of the process. Do you see any of the processes right now that you feel that could be redefined, or maybe you already have some ideas or some work in progress where you actually using AI to do things completely differently within clinical trials?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can give you one maybe concrete example. I'm not sure how familiar you are with this clinical trial data. creation. Like for any clinical trial, we have to be collect the trial data, obviously, and we have to map those data into, let's say, ADAM data sets. Like this is a set of standard type of data that we have to that works for all the trials, that you have to create a set of data sets, and then you submit those data sets, and you also use those set of data sets to do your analysis. So this is kind of required by the health authority, and also it's required for any of the submission of your clinical trial reporting work. To create that set of data sets, you have to write specs, right? So you have to define how you want to define every single variable in all these data sets. So usually, I can for sure only speak for Roche, but I'm pretty sure that for all the companies, what people do is like you have almost like a Google Sheets or Excel file that lists out all the variables and the ways that you want to define this variable. So you have a very, very long spreadsheet or list of how you would like to derive those variables. And right now, without AI, what people do is I would have a programmer or like a data scientist that would read all the specs and then write my code to derive according to the spec. And this probably iterative process because, okay, I may identify some of the errors in the spec file, then I go back and edit it on the Google Sheets or Excel, and then I go back and write some code to implement that logic, right? So that's how people work for the past decades or even 20 years. And when we try to leverage AI to solve this problem, because we would like to have an AI to help us write this code faster, right? So we would give the spec to the AI and ask the AI to write the code for us. Yes. So what happened is the AI could do the trick in some sense that it could handle the simple logic pretty well. But we also identify that sometimes it misunderstands the spec a lot. And when you look deeper into that, you realize a lot of the language that people use for many years on the spec, it seems to be to human data scientists or programmers, because we all have this domain knowledge and we understand what you're talking about. Even if you don't write things explicitly in the spec, because we assume something like in the background and everyone knows about this, so you don't even bother to write it in the spec. And you always get this correctly mapped or derived in your code because everyone agrees on this knowledge, but you just don't put it on the spreadsheet. But then when you put this into the AI, solution, it's going to get this thing way off because it doesn't really understand the the underlying or like something that's hidden from the spec. So what we learn from this is like we almost have to rewrite everything in the spec to make sure this is AI ready. But people have never thought about this in previous years because we don't really have the solution available for us. But to implement that right now, to let's say leverage AI to write the better, let's say ADAM code, you have to basically rethink how you make sure that the spec file is machine readable or like AI ready, and that's something applicable to a lot of the use cases, and we realize, and so that if we want to make the solution better, like performs better, we have to rethink about this process and how you actually write the spec, how this spec could be read into the AI solution. Those are the things that we're focusing on right now.
So it feels like you have extra work, like you need to put more extra work in front at the beginning
exactly.
for AI to actually help you speed up
and it's actually tricky just to add to that. I think it's actually tricky for people to understand at the very beginning because people feel like you're adding in some information that's almost like useless because everyone knows about it. Is you don't even need to specify it out, but for some AI solutions to work, you would have to submit those information into your solution. And, that's kind of like one of the key learnings that we have got throughout these initiatives.
That follow-up question I wanted to ask, do you feel there is or maybe you have more examples of the cases where companies were trying to use AI where actually the AI was not needed and like some traditional approaches were more applicable? But because everyone is doing AI, everyone is trying to like implement it everywhere.
Yeah, so I think, we have to identify sometimes or distinguish, let's say, automation versus, AI or GenAI solutions. I think a lot of the process that we do in our clinical reporting could be automated, like in terms of, if you read in some data, you run some report, and then you want to publish the report. Let's say if you have the pipeline built up nicely, like these things could be automatically triggered. Let's say you have a very standard layout for your data or setup or specs of your data, and then you build your report maybe in, let's say, in Markdown or Portal, and then you publish it in somewhere, like maybe in RS Connect or like some other platforms. You could actually build the whole thing in the automation pipeline, and you don't even need to leverage AI to do any of the work, because you would have a data, you have your code, and you have your published like steps that could trigger the launch of your website file. I think people probably need to look into this space to see if they could already achieve some kind of efficiency in terms of leveraging automation. One key thing is like we're trying to we put our code base in GitLab, and you can use GitLab Actions to actually trigger the run of your report. Let's say if you get the data, let's say weekly or monthly, you could actually build a pipeline automatically to trigger the generating of the report and publishing the report to certain website internally, and that's completely done by automation and no AI involved at all. But I think with AI, if you look at this automation process, I think there could be something that you add to this process that maybe the AI would, in the back end, look at all the reporting events that you're doing, all the tasks that you have been assigned on, and could make some suggestions in terms of sending in a reminder or whatever, like to idea like, okay, you may have this 5 studies ongoing, and you may want to consider send out a report of this data or whatever, next week. Let's plan something like this. So I think it adds to the more, let's say, personal touch to the process. But I think the underlying about this data to report to publish, this whole thing could be done just by automation. While in terms of how you write the report, how you write the code to the report, you could leverage AI to write it faster when you build those things. But let's say once those things are done, you don't expect to change the code at all or the report at all. You just rerun everything. I think this industry needs to look a lot at the automation and how you enable that to get things more efficient.
We are slowly running out of time, so I want to ask the last question that we ask all our guests at the podcast. So what is the problem within your expertise, within your industry or field, that you're surprised that has not been solved yet?
I think having been working on this GenAI initiatives or projects for some time, I realized one big challenge, which surprised to me that it's been overlooked quite a lot, which is we haven't really spent a lot of time preparing our domain knowledge data or metadata. We're trying to, because we have been in I almost call it like a bubble that we feel like okay, AI could solve everything for us, so we kind of dump all we know, or whether or not it's documents or whatever information that we have to the AI and ask it to figure something out for us. But we didn't realize that there needs to be a lot of preparation in terms of the data that we feed into the AI, like the training or even the prompts that we give the AI. I think people are certainly overlooking the space and try to, because they're so the AI, the solutions look so promising that people feel like the AI will solve that for me, but actually it won't. So, in terms of domain knowledge, a naive example is that, for example, if we talk about our system, we call it Ocean in Roche, that's the computing environment we use for all the data scientists. It's called Ocean. But if you, what is Ocean? If you ask that on ChatGPT, it will say it's a body of water, whatever, bigger than sea, or something like that. It's kind of like a geographic, definition of ocean. But if you ask it in a domain of in Roche, and then I would bet a lot of people will tell you, okay, ocean is our environment, computing environment. So it's this kind of knowledge. This is a naive example, but you can imagine a lot of the definitions and a lot of the the terms that we use in our industry is quite different to what's defined elsewhere. And this applies to all the industries, I believe, tech industry, any industry that would have their own terms that they would like to, leverage or use in their AI models. I think we need to do a much better job to to define the information, to feed that information in the AI. I don't think we have done enough in that regard. But we also feel like if we could do a better job there, the possibility of using AI to achieve a better or more efficient process or workflow would be within, because that's really what we're working on right now. A lot of the time, we're just preparing the data, make sure that's AI ready, and then usually the outcome of that is very, very promising. And that's why we're spending more and more time preparing the metadata, preparing our domain knowledge to feed that into the AI.
Thank you so much. That was very insightful and very interesting conversation. If our listeners, if you feel like there's anybody that could benefit from listening to this episode, please share it. Thank you so much, Vincent, for participating. Have a beautiful day ahead, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great. Nice talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This was Where Technology Meets Science by Epsilon. If you know someone who might enjoy the episode, share it with them and subscribe to never miss a new episode. At Epsilon, we empower pharmaceutical and life science companies to leverage open source technology for faster data-driven decision-making in regulated environments. Until the next time.